Hello and good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world today, whatever time of the day it is. Welcome to your wake up call. My name is Marc Caron, and I'm coming into you live here from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And it's 9 o'clock in the morning here. And I'm really excited to come with the first official show of your wake up call today. And it was great to be on last week with the Pyramid Society and kind of sharing the things that we're going to talk about over the course of time in your wake-up call. And it's just an exciting time in the world with all the crazy things going on. And, I think it's an exciting time for us to really kind of wake up to our true selves and what's going on. And I think that's one of the advantages to having this time, in isolation or outside of what we used to do normally. Now, in that, it's created a lot of uncertainty for a lot of people, and certainty is certainly one of our top human needs that we have as humans in our human condition. And it's part of our need for security and safety and knowing that everything's going to be okay. And right now people are looking for certainty in these uncertain times. So one of the things I really would like to be able to do here, and I'm going to share you some things I've learned over the years that's made a difference in my lives and the lives of many of the people I know as well. And today I'm calling it the patterns of consciousness. And it's kind of twofold. We're going to talk about consciousness, and we're going to talk about patterns, and then our patterns of our consciousness. So as we begin, first, I want to talk about really what is consciousness. And at its core, consciousness is related a lot and spoken a lot of it in the spiritual communities and accessing different realms of spirit and consciousness. Yet in our human condition, a big part of consciousness is really about awareness. And it comes down to, how aware are we in everything that we do and what's happening around us. And when we become more and more aware of what we do, what we say, how we show up, it really changes how we really even act and interact with the world and with other people. So with our awareness, even our awarenesses can be as simple as, what are we focusing on? Are we paying attention? Are we aware of what it is that we're paying attention to? Because we could have something going on over here that could be really great. And we could have something here going on that's maybe not so good, but what are we focusing on, right? Are we focusing on what's good about the moment, or are we focusing about what's not so great about the moment? And that's just one piece of awareness that can fundamentally change your life. If you've ever met negative people, there's a habit of focusing on everything that's wrong. Now, if you ever meet people who are happy all the time and happy for, what also appears to be for no reason sometimes, what is that and why? A big part of it comes down to, what are we focusing on? So we're going to talk about that as we go forward. And then the other side of the coin, when we talk about consciousness, is we talk about patterns. And that's because everything is a pattern. And, I don't know what happened there. So anyways, everything is a pattern. Now, right from the building blocks of life, our DNA, there's patterns in our DNA. There's patterns in the solar system, in the cosmos, in the universe. If you take a look at how the planets are all aligned from the sun, there's patterns there. The way all the planets move around the sun as they're rotating themselves, there's a pattern there. Fibonacci sequence, if you've ever heard of that, it's a mathematical numbered sequence that you can see in all living things, in all life. And these are the patterns that really kind of create life, and that's the foundation. Now, when I talk about everything's a pattern, what's really interesting is everything in our behavior, in our thinking, in our language, in our focus, even in our consciousness, is a pattern. Because we use the same words often. We'll tell the same story often. And I'll get into that. That'll be a later show as we talk about, the human needs and why we do what we do. But the first thing I want to do today is start by laying the foundation of waking up, because we need to wake up and recognize the patterns that we run in our lives. And right from, think about it. We have patterns in the calendar. Monday to Friday is a pattern of the week, a pattern of the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And then it goes from Monday to Sunday and it starts again. That's a week. Then we have a pattern of a month. We have a pattern of a year, pattern of a decade. The way we measure time is a pattern. So when we take a look at the patterns in our lives, and what I was talking about earlier about patterns of consciousness and patterns of focus, we have a pattern on what it is we choose to focus on. We have a pattern of what it is that we do. Many people will have patterns in how their day works. They get up at the same time every day. Whether it's yoga, meditation, and that's of course what we teach and we encourage here with the Pyramid Meditation Society is, of course, meditation, yoga, breath, and there's a pattern there. Now, a lot of people wake up in the morning in today's world and they get up and they're so busy being busy that they're rushing to get out the door to be to work on time, so there's a pattern. What happens if you had a pattern of getting up a little earlier and starting your day with some meditation, some breathing, and checking in with who you are? And this is why we talk about when we look at successful people, and I don't necessarily mean people in terms of business and money, but people who deem themselves as successful because they're happy and fulfilled. They have a pattern as well. They start their day and work their day in a very different way. So there's a pattern that happens. And if we talk about consciousness within that pattern, that becomes an awareness of the patterns that you have. Because as soon as we become aware of our patterns, whether they're serving us or not, then we have the ability to change them. Because what happens is we can't actually change what we don't acknowledge. And if we're not aware of things, how do we actually create the change if we don't even know that something could, should, or that we want to change it? So it's about really taking a look at the patterns in our lives and how those patterns really affect where we're at. Because I can tell you one thing, we are exactly where we are in our lives and the way we show up and how we feel because of the patterns that we run every day. And then my question is, are you consciously aware of your patterns? And of all of them, some of them, none of them? Why are you doing what you're doing? Are we even aware? And that becomes the foundation of consciousness, just in the human condition outside of the spiritual side of things. And for me, it's so important to become aware of our patterns, because when we do, we can change them. And the beautiful thing is we can actually implement new patterns and new habits based on what we want. And we can actually look at others who actually have what we want, and we can model the patterns and the habits that they do. Because if you want certain results, take a look at someone who's getting the results or is living a life similar to that you would like to. Maybe it's just an emotional state of happiness and joy and bliss. What's their pattern? What are they aware of? What are they focusing on? Where's their consciousness at? I think it's a really important question, because so many of us go through, like I was saying, through our lives, not even knowing why we're doing what we're doing. So in these patterns becomes what we call conditioning. And I don't know how many people out there may be watching or is aware of Pavlov and his dogs. It's something I learned years and years ago in grade 10 sociology when we were studying psychology that fascinated me. And it was a scientist back in the day, I think it was the 30s or 40s. But anyways, he realized that, when he would feed his dogs, they'd get excited and they'd salivate. And there was a pattern that kind of happened. So what he started doing was ringing a bell when he would feed his dogs. And so he would ring the bell, feed the dogs get excited, eat, salivate, and do their thing. And then it got to the point where he would just ring the bell and wouldn't feed the dogs right away. And as soon as the dogs heard the bell, They recognized the pattern that meant food was coming, even though the food didn't come for another 5 minutes. So the dogs get excited, they start salivating, they start waiting for their foods. So I share this story with you because it's really important to understand how these patterns become conditioned in our body. And this is where, they started sharing more and more about conditioning and what happens. So anytime something happens to us in a peak emotional state, we can anchor that in and condition it. And if there's certain things that we want to feel every day, we'll do the same things and condition that pattern and that belief system and that emotion into our body. And then it becomes really an unconscious habit or pattern or routine, right? So there's many things that we know, that we don't know actually, as we're growing up, that we get conditioned in terms of our belief systems into things that we may not have even chosen consciously. Religion's a great example for that. Our society is a great example for that, because if we're raised in a certain way, that's all we know. So when we talk about consciousness being awareness, if we're brought up in one way, that's where our awareness is. We're looking at everything within this model of the world that is formed based on how we were raised. We pick up our values and beliefs from our school, from our friends, from our families, from religion, from culture, from society, in terms of what's wrong, what's right. And then we kind of behave in kind. So I encourage everyone to maybe take a look at maybe some of your habits, your daily patterns, and how you really show up in your day. Because in our patterns creates emotion as well. People who are habitually or regularly happy, they're happy. And that's how they generally show up in everywhere where they go. People who are sad or angry or frustrated, that's what they see, because that's what they're focusing on. That's where their awareness is going. That's where their consciousness is going, into that emotional place. Even though maybe on the other side of the unhappiness or the uncomfortability, there might be something really joyful going on, yet we're focused on something that we didn't like, that we picked up. And we've learned that behavior, and it becomes a habit. And I know in my journey over the years, I learned something that was really profound. And it was a simple statement that, you can't influence while you're being judged, and you can't be influenced if you're being judged. And for me, it was really powerful, because I thought about that, and I said, where I was working and in certain relationships in my life, I didn't have the influence, and these people weren't able to influence me. And I realized it was because we were both judging each other. And that was profound. And then I asked myself, well, where did I learn judgment? Where did I learn that? And I went back and I did some self-inquiry and started learning. And it was in some formative years where a member of my family sat at the dinner table all the time and just always complained, was always negative all the time. And I picked that up. And then I started looking for everything that was wrong in every situation, as opposed to looking to everything that was right, because every coin has three sides, right? Just so you know, yes, I said three sides. You got the heads, you got the tails, and then you got the outside. So no matter whatever we look at, we can choose to look at the good, we can choose to look at the bad, or we can just choose to look at what's going on, neither good or bad. And we can actually consciously choose, because we are now aware of what we're looking for and what we want. We can take a look at that, and we can start making more conscious decisions. And that becomes conscious choice, based on awareness and based on what we want. Are you choosing and making the decisions consciously every day based on who you believe you are, how you show up, and what you want? Because I can tell you, most people are making decisions just to survive, just to get by, just to pay the rent, just whatever that is. And that's their decision, is just a very, very basic survival position that we're in. And when we're in that kind of role, we look at things quite a bit differently. It's the it's It's really when we take a look at all of these things. We've got our patterns and our habits. We have our consciousness and awareness and becoming aware of why we do what we do. And that was part of my journey. It was discovering what it is, why do I do what I do? And ultimately, we all do what we do because we want to be loved. We want to be appreciated. We all fear being rejected. We have the fear that we're not going to be good enough and that people won't like us. And this is kind of part of one of our innate human conditions that I think is important. When we all understand that, we can actually, again, make better choices, because we have a habit of thinking that we're not good enough, We're focusing, and our awareness is that we're not good enough and it could be for our families, for our spouse, for our coworkers, our bosses, whatever that might be. It becomes a very primary thing. And whenever we feel we're not good enough, it raises the fact that we won't be loved. And we sink into a place of low self-esteem and low self-confidence. And again, that is awareness, because are we aware, in our consciousness, are we even aware that that's what we're doing? Because we can make a choice at any time, to be happy and to focus on what's good. What are your patterns? What are you aware of? What are you not aware of? Because here's the thing, folks. Whatever happens in our lives, whatever anybody does, whatever thing happens, really is just a happening. It's a situation that is. There's the facts, yet we will give completely different meaning to a situation based on what we're focusing on, what our belief systems are. And those, again, are all patterns. And we can change the meaning. Are we giving something an empowering meaning? Are we giving it a positive meaning? Are we giving it a painful or negative or non-inspiring, not empowering meaning? It's very simple. And the interesting thing about that is, as soon as we give something meaning, it actually affects how we feel. It affects our biochemistry, our biology. It affects our emotional state, because the meaning that we give it, is going to create some sort of, a good feeling or a bad feeling in general. And we can choose that. I always use a great example. Here in Vancouver, we have an antique wooden roller coaster at our amusement park. And there's people who love it. There's people who hate it. And what I find really interesting is most people who hate it have never been on it, right? And yet there's the people who love it, and they just love it. Now, you've got a 3.5-minute experience. It's exactly the same, and it's been the same for, I think, like 70 years. Hasn't changed. It's the same 3.5-minute ride. Why is it that some people love it and some people hate it? Because they've given it a meaning. They've given it a meaning that it's afraid. Maybe their mother, or father, or aunt, or uncle, or cousin told them how scary it was for them, and they see people screaming on it and whatever that is, so they attach fear to the meaning of that roller coaster ride. It's just not going to be great. And in that is going to create a completely different biochemical cocktail in their body, of stress and anxiety and things of that nature, than the other person who loves it. And the person who loves it is going to get on it. They're going to use their body in a different way. They're going to yell, they're going to scream, they're going to love it. They're going to get adrenaline. They're going to come off of that roller coaster completely pumped. Same experience, completely different meaning, completely different emotional state, and completely different biochemistry cocktail, because our biochemistry really affects and is part of who we are and where our emotions are coming from. So when we look at our patterns, and it's becoming aware, again, which is consciousness, at the foundation of consciousness is awareness. What are we aware of? What are we focusing on? What are we paying attention to? And is it positive or negative? So, these are the things that are really important. So let's start with our biochemistry, our physiology, our body. There is a pattern in how we use our body. And I'll tell you a little something. If you want to feel a specific emotion, use your body in the way that people express that when people are happy, they're using their body in a very different way than people who are depressed. Now, if you're depressed, typically you're going to be slouched over, you're breathing different. You might even be laying in bed in the fetal position or whatever that might be. Yet, a happy person is often smiling, their shoulders are back, their head's up, they're breathing completely different, their language is completely different. So I use that as an example because there's a pattern to that, right? And when we use our body in a different way and we use different patterns in our body, it releases a different biochemistry. When we talk about patterns again, just what we eat and what we digest, again, is a pattern. What we put in our mouth, what we choose to eat, one of our main pillars here is really a plant-based diet. I'm a vegetarian, and the Pyramid Society, one of the things we talk about is the plant-based diet. And what we look at in that is that pattern. So if you have a pattern of drinking lots of coffee, eating meat and sugar and dairy and all sorts of processed foods, that's going to affect your biochemistry, your physiology, your body. Primarily, it's huge, and that's a pattern. And then there's an awareness or a non-awareness based on what it is you want to eat. Now, if you're eating a plant-based diet and you're eating, raw, green, organic, plant-based foods, you're going to have a very, very different biochemistry and a physiology, which is also going to affect the way that you feel. And again, that's a pattern, right? What we eat, what we put in our body is a pattern. There's no question about it. And it's a habit. It's also a conscious choice. For most people, it's an unconscious choice. So when someone's conscious about their choice, they're aware of the decisions they're making and why. When it's an unconscious choice, we're not necessarily aware of why we're making this decision. We're just doing it because we were taught that Big Macs are good and it's okay to eat cows and animals and whatever that might be. And then that becomes a belief system. When we become more aware of what's going on in our diet and our nutrition and the value of eating an organic, raw, plant-based diet, we start making different choices, right? Because we have a different awareness. We have a consciousness-based approach to what it is we're going to put in our body and why. So these patterns in terms of how we use our body, even if we're exercising, doing yoga, or if we're not, motion creates emotion is one of the things I learned over my years of study. And I've seen it in action. Anytime you want to change the way you feel, change the way you're using your body. Because again, there is a pattern to how we use our body to the emotions that we feel, which I think is fantastic. Because again, now, if we do that consciously, right, with awareness, we can use our body in a different way. I find the same thing. I'm sitting at my desk here in front of my computer speaking to you, but I'm working really diligently to be aware of my posture because it's so easy to get in front of your computer and be doing this all the time. And that's going to change the way that I breathe. It's going to add pain to my back. This is going to give me, a better balance, a better structure. And it's also, from a spiritual side of view, it's also putting my spine in alignment that gives me a better way to connect with the divine and the creator because I'm not all infarctated. I'm breathing better. I'm open. And one thing I also learned I thought was really quite powerful, and this was something I saw it in a number of different areas. And we hear the term, again, lead with your heart. When we have a good posture, right, and our spine, our neck straight, our heart is actually a little bit in front of our head. And so when you're leading with your heart, just posture will change that. You'll breathe differently. And again, that's a pattern. Are we even aware that we're being slouched over and we're not breathing very well? Breathing is a pattern, right? The deep yogic breath, full breaths, that's a pattern. And that pattern will change your physiology or consciousness. It'll change how you feel. It'll change everything because the most important part of life is breath. It's the one thing we can't live with for the shortest amount of time. 3 to 5 minutes, if you're lucky. You'd be a guy like David Blaine. He made it like 17 minutes. And that was really spectacular. But he went through a whole process to do that. But again, that was about as far as he can go. And that was, I believe, the world record, 17 minutes without actually breathing or holding his breath. Not that I recommend anyone, go to try that. But I say that because in our awareness, in our consciousness, we have the ability to make decisions. And we can only make better decisions when we become aware of what we are doing and the decisions we are making, and if they're leading us closer to what we want or further away than from what we want. And then we get into a pattern of our focus. And I touched on that earlier as we got started. And our focus is really important because, wherever our focus goes, energy flows. Whatever we focus on magnifies, right? Whatever that is, I could be focusing on you guys here, watching and taking in the information that I'm sharing and what we're talking about, or I could be, daydreaming and looking out over here at plants and out the window. And that's not going to be a very good way to communicate with you guys, right? Because I'm focused, I'm giving you all my attention, my energy, and my presence to what I want to share with you today. And that's focus. So much is going on in the world today. So much is going on in just our little, areas where we are even today. Yet, are we even aware? Are we aware of the blood that's coursing through our earlobes right now? Do we pay attention and recognize that our heart beats every single day, all day? It doesn't take a break. It doesn't rest, and it's there all the time. Are we aware of that? Right? Do we have gratitude for the miracle of this human body and this gift of life? Right? And knowing that we have the ability to make it whatever it is we want just by choosing focus, and making the decision, because that becomes a pattern. We can literally change our focus, and it'll change everything that we do, right? It'll change everything that we experience. And you might just have to change your focus one little bit. 2 millimeters is what my teacher Tony would say is the difference between creating a more outstanding and a more fantastic life. Is we just change something 2 millimeters, just a small start. It's like compound interest, right? It's you make that small change and you keep it up, and over time it will have a cumulative effect. And it starts again with awareness. We cannot change what we don't acknowledge. And if I was to ask you, what is it you want to change most in your life right now? What is that? And are you willing to acknowledge some of the things that, you might be bringing to the table that can create, or, the situation that you can change? Because most of the time, everything is within our ability to change it. And we have to be able to recognize what we can change and what we can't. And then we decide whether we're going to accept it the way it is, whether we want to change it, if it's still possible to change, if we're going to leave, or if we're going to do something different. But it all comes down to conscious choice. And so many people don't think they don't have a choice. And that's the biggest, I guess the biggest myth. We always have a choice. And it's the most beautiful part of the human condition, is having choice. And we need to exercise that, because if you don't want to do something, don't do it. If you want to do something, do it. It's that simple. And how many of us don't do the things we want to do because we want to, please our parents, maybe please our church or religion or our group, our peer group? It might be something about work. We might feel safe in our job, where we're afraid to leave a job that we don't like because we don't know if we'll get another job that might pay as well, or, because we need that certainty. Yet we're not making a conscious choice of what we really want. And this is, in the personal development world, they talk about goal setting all the time. People who, actually regularly make goals and write them down and focus on them are 80% plus more apt to succeed and achieve what it is that they want, because they actually know. And so many people out there in the world don't know what it is that they really want, but they certainly know what they don't want. How many people get up and go to a job they don't like, or in a relationship that's not working for them, or, whatever that might be. And we have to look at ourselves first and have a conscious awareness of how are we showing up? What's our pattern? What's going on there? All right, so those two patterns so far that are the fundamental foundation of creating any kind of change and living a happy, fulfilled, blissful life. And first, it's how you're going to take care of your body. What you doing with your physiology? Are you exercising? Are you drinking enough water? Are you eating good, healthy foods? Or are you not, right? That becomes an awareness. It's just really taking a look and being aware that, hey, you know what? I'm not really eating very well. Or I'm not exercising. No wonder I might be a little overweight. If you want more energy, exercise. Motion creates emotion, and something that stays in motion gets in motion tends to stay in motion. It's a law of momentum. So it's creating that momentum so that we can have that ability and to really move forward and enjoy life, because happiness is really in the realm of progress. As long as we're making progress, we're moving forward, we're going to be a lot happier than if we're stagnant, stuck, and stopped. And at the very least, do something. So then our second pattern is our pattern of our focus on. What are we habitually focused on? Are we focusing on what's good, what can be better? Are we focusing on what's not good, what we don't like? Are we constantly complaining or looking for what's not good about a situation? Or do we look for the best in the situation? That is, again, another pattern and another habit. And remember, the more we do things, it gets ingrained in our body and it gets locked in. Remember Pavlov's dogs, right? He got to the point where that bell, every time they heard that bell, they were on it for food. I've got a dog over here. Every time he hears a little bag crinkle, it's quite funny because he thinks it's food time, because that crinkle of the bag, he's now been conditioned in this pattern because it happens over and over and over and over and over again. Food is what he loves. Food is what a dog loves, right? And so they go, food. And we do the same thing. So if somebody says something to us, we may react or behave in a different way because that's locked into our body. If somebody looks at me the way my dad used to look at me, all of a sudden that could bring something up, right? It's what we call a trigger. And we'll talk more about that in the future as we move forward and you guys are tuning in, because there's a lot there that is more of a deeper dive. I just want to give you an overview, and then as we move forward, we'll be doing a deeper dive into these topics. Now, the third equally as important aspect is the pattern of our language, the pattern of our stories, the pattern of the meaning that we give things. And we have language patterns. Language is by far one of the most important tools that we use to create. In the Bible, they say in the beginning, it began with the Word, and the Word was God, right? And it's all creation. And language, in terms of our words, in terms of the vibration of our language, in terms of the meaning that our words have, very, very, very powerful. Words can create, they can destroy, they start wars, they create peace, marriage, divorce, pain, pleasure. Words are super, super powerful and important. And again, when we talk about consciousness and awareness, are we aware of the words that we use on a regular basis? Are we aware of the pattern that those words elicit in our own selves, in our own emotion, in the people that we connect with and contact with? Are we using our words and our language as a means of creation, or are we using them as a means of limitation? And I know, because I've been there. I'm one of those people. I used to be a complainer. I used to look at everything wrong because I always thought there was always a way to make things better, which I do believe. But I now look for the good in it. Says, okay, that's pretty good. How do we make it better? Versus going in and starting to make someone wrong about what they did or where they're at or what it might be or what the situation is, whether it's work or life related. And now it's really, how do we make it better? What is we really want? I'm always looking for what's the outcome? What's the purpose? What do we intend here? Right? And that becomes very different than just saying, this doesn't work, this is terrible, you did a terrible job, or whatever that might be, because those words are powerfully negative. And if it's with a coworker or family or friend or sibling, and you start tearing them down, they're going to feel very different. And in our words can be very different than if we go, hey, I like what you did here. What was going on? Help me understand what it was you're looking to achieve. And you might actually be able to help them do it a little better. But again, that's focus and language, right? Because our story, even if we have a life situation, this is where our language becomes really interesting because, if we're telling a story that was negative of something that happened to us 10, 20, 30 years ago, and we're telling that story today, it's like we're reliving it. And remember, patterns, the conditioning, the more we tell the story, the more we feel those emotions, the more it becomes part of who we are, and it becomes anchored into our body, and it becomes a habitual emotion. It's an habitual story because every time we meet someone or we want to tell someone our story or where we're at, we'll tell them the same story. And are we telling a story of something negative or bad, and how that perpetuated negativity throughout your life? Or are we talking about, a happening and creating a meaning to the happening that then gives us a more empowering life, right? Because we can take any happening, anything that happens, and give it to, you can give it a positive meaning, you can give it an empowering meaning. That's our choice. And as the free will that we all have as human beings, my question is, are you making that choice consciously with awareness? Are you being negative because you want to be negative and it serves you in some way? Are you doing that consciously? Or are you looking at the positive side of things, and because that's who you are, and then that becomes a new conscious choice or your conscious choice? And for most people, it's really unconscious because it's been a habit. It's when we recognize that, hey, I can look at this in a very different way and change the meaning, change how I feel, and actually make this work for me in a better way than taking me down, a slippery slope that's not very positive or feel good. So again, take a look at your habits, take a look at the patterns that you have and what it is you're looking at and how you can change, your body. You just get up, drink a glass of water, get moving, you'll create change. Right? And that takes conscious awareness that you have to do that. Boom, you got to change your state. Get up, jump up and down. Woo! Do something different, right? And that will change the way you feel. As soon as you're feeling down or anything like that, get up, move, shake it out, dance, do something. I guarantee you'll change the way you feel. Also change what you're focusing on. Change consciously going, oh, that's not working for me. Now with awareness, right? Conscious awareness, now we can change what we acknowledge that we want to change, and change is up to you. You can do whatever you want based on who you want to be, who you feel you are. And I talk about who you want to be and your identity because it's the most powerful force in our human psychology, because whoever we believe we are, we will act and behave and show up to meet that belief of who we are. It's one of the most powerful driving forces. So, if you have an identity of being, a lover of all people, I'm compassionate, I care, I want to make a difference in the world, you're going to show up very differently as someone who doesn't care about other people, only cares about money, and will, do whatever they can to rule whatever it is in their own world. So the importance of our awareness is paramount. What is it that you can focus on and become more aware of to change in your life? And in our language and meaning, remember, we're still on that third pillar. And our language, story, and meaning, remember back to the roller coaster, we tell a different story, changes how we feel. We use different words, and that's a story, right? The meaning, meaning, we are meaning makers. As human beings, we look to make meaning out of everything. And what the meaning that we make on every situation will lend completely to the emotion that we'll feel. So if you want to feel good more than feel bad, and I would imagine most people do because I know I do, then let's focus on using our language and give things a positive meaning. And even if things aren't great, that's okay. But then just see them how they are. Be truthful and say, hey, you know what? This isn't working for me. This is what I want. And then take action to make it what you want, whatever situation, right? But let's not give away our power, because again, We want to be aware that we have the right, the ability, and the freedom to choose. And that becomes amongst the most powerful things of our humanness, so that we can actually dial that in, and we can choose the meaning of any situation based on who we are, what we want, and how we show up. And again, it all becomes a pattern, it all becomes a habit, and it becomes conditioned. And the more you do anything, it's like building a muscle. You don't go to a gym and work out once and get fit and you don't have to go back. It's a practice. Like meditation is a daily practice. Your yoga is a daily practice. Whatever it is we do becomes a practice. And I'd encourage you to take a look around, your lives. And if you pick one thing that, an area of improvement in your life, how can we take a look at that in a way to look at the patterns, the cycle, the routine that's creating that habit, and become aware, become more conscious of what that is, and then what it is we need to do to make the change. And if you're not sure necessarily what it is to make the change, the formula, the recipe for success, or whatever you want to call it, I always suggest, it's something that I learned again a long time ago, it's modeling. Take a look at those who have done it before. If you want to lose weight, take a look at those who have done it and what's worked for them. Maybe have a conversation, interview them, do some studies on Google. There's ways that we can learn what that is. If it's about getting out of debt and making more money, let's study some people who have done it, who have gone before you, and learn what they did, because success leaves clues. And when you do what others have done, it'll help you get there faster, because there's a pattern, right? There's a formula. Success, achievement, losing weight, all of the things that we want in life, really, it's not as hard as we think, because people are doing it around us all the time. And the formula for weight loss, fitness, money, relationships, all of those things, the formula is really only 20% of the solution, because that's dialed in. And if it was that easy, everybody would be rich, everybody would be fit. It would just be that simple. But the other 80% is our psychology, and why we aren't doing what we know we should be doing. And I'm guilty. I do it in my life too, because the psychology is more important, is why we aren't maybe making the money, or why we aren't in relationships, or why we are not, taking the action that we need to take care of our physical body. What is our psychology behind that? And then it becomes, again, a pattern, typically unconscious, right? So we're not aware of the pattern, and it's a negative self-talk. It's a feeling that we're not good enough, that we won't be loved, and it doesn't feel good. There's somehow we're attaching pain to the things that we really want. So, these becomes, some simple patterns. And if you change 3 things in your life, you change your physiology, you change your focus, you change your language, meaning, and story, you will change your life. And it starts with consciousness, which is an awareness that something has to change. Because if we don't see that anything has to change, we're not going to take any action. And action, is a key part for, kind of really achieving and creating anything, that we have to put our thoughts, our words, our emotion into action to start the creation of what it is that we want. And for me, that's really the most fundamental place we need to start, is how are we using our body? What are we focusing on, paying attention to? And what's the language, meaning, and story that we're using to convey to others where we're at, what that situation was, what that happening was. And then, are you showing up in a way that is congruent, or the parallel is who you believe you are? Because we don't want to be a hypocrite when we're out there sharing things with the world, and we want to be able to, be a good example, right? So that's really, a big part of what I wanted to share today, being, taking a look at our patterns and our habits, and encouraging each and every one of you who's watching to take a look at something you want to change in your life, and take a look at the patterns. Take a look at what that is. Because remember, Think of this. When we talk about patterns, I don't know if you're watching, if you remember the old vinyl LPs and the records, they had the big groove in there and the needle, and it played the same all the time. That was a pattern. Then CDs, which we don't even have much anymore, right? Same thing, but it's digital. If you look at it, you can see the digital patterns. And every time we play, the same song or the track on that CD, it plays the same. It's the same thing. So remember when we talked about conditioning of patterns, if we see a certain stimulus, if the bell rings, right, we'll react, or we will act, or we will, respond in a way to that stimulus. It's a stimulus response situation. So it's becoming aware of that, and sometimes you got to scratch that record. You got to interrupt those patterns to create the change. And most importantly, you have to replace it with a new pattern. And when you do in a new habit, that's going to take time. Again, it's like building muscle in the gym, right? So let's focus on those three things for the next week. I want us all to be able to take a look and talk about, I'd love to hear some feedback and comments down below here. If there's anything that makes sense to you or you have any questions, please put the comments below in the comment section, because I'll get back to them and I will answer them. The exciting part is when people kind of go, oh, now I see that I'm doing that. And it was the same thing for me with what I shared earlier, that whole story about judgment. Changed my life, totally changed my life, because I replaced judgment with understanding. And so I changed my habit, my pattern, my focus, my language. I'm sure I even changed my physiology. I'm just not sure how in that situation. But I certainly changed focus and language, because I would look at things in a different way. I wouldn't be looking at judgment. I'd be looking for understanding and appreciation instead of what was wrong. I would use a language of creation that was more powerful than a language of destruction to put other people down so that I could feel better about myself and my role and my work, right? Thinking I knew better. I went to look at a position of understanding, appreciation, and still, how can we make it better? But it wasn't about making somebody else wrong or less than. And sometimes when I get moving, I can be a bull in a china shop, because I just want to make stuff happen. I get pretty intense. And I had to become more aware of, how other people reacted to my intensity when it was just getting done, because, my heart was in the right place. It's how things came across that were not taken necessarily, the way I had intended. And I had no awareness of it. I wasn't aware, because I was just getting the job done. I was just like, let's go. And I wasn't thinking about, the impact I was having on other people in my communications and in my actions. So that was one of the really, really big, profound things for me as I started learning these tools and implementing them in my life. And it was the same as, if you watched my introduction interview last week, it was the same kind of thing when I'd reached 200 pounds and I was, heavier than I'd ever been. As much as I was aware of things, I wasn't being honest with myself, and I wasn't taking any action. And I was running the same pattern in my physiology, because I was eating terrible. I wasn't moving. I wasn't exercising. I was focusing on trying to keep a relationship in place. That's what I was doing. I was looking to keep comfortable. And that was my focus. My focus was lost on my health and my well-being. It was related to a happiness that was in a relationship. And then I would use, language, meaning, and story that would say it was okay. And then one day I just woke up and it was not okay anymore. It was not right. It was not who I am. And that's when I made a change. In 6 weeks, I'd lost 35 plus pounds. I've kept it off ever since. And that was back in 2007. So 13 years ago. And it's just really powerful when you make those distinctions. And I'd love to hear stories of anyone out there who's watching. Again, share it in the comments down below, or you can email me. I'd love to know what kind of change you're looking to make, and if there's anything here that you've used that made a difference for you that we can share with others. And that's really exciting for me, because I love to see people light up and wake up, right? You wake up to a whole new, that's why it's your wake up call. I want you to wake up to a whole new opportunity and go, oh, hey, I can focus on something different. hey, I can change my language and tell a different story and create a whole different reality. Oh my God, I can use my body differently, right? Because those are three patterns that'll change your life. And just becoming aware consciously of why we're doing what we're doing. And it all starts there. So yeah, that's really what I wanted to share today with you guys on the patterns of consciousness. Now, as well as we move forward with I wanted to share with you as well, there's a digital meditation summit coming up on June 13th, and it's presented by the PSSM USA division and chapter. So I look forward to that. I've actually also been invited to speak. So I'll be talking about the mindset of meditation. And I'm not going to be talking as much about meditation as you might think, but I'm definitely going to be talking about the mindset that comes with it. And again, it's going to be related to our patterns and our habits in regards to our consciousness and our identity. We're going to talk a lot about identity and who we believe we are and who we really are as well. Now, I know that there's also another event coming up in July as well with PSSM group, and that's going to be July 12th weekend, I believe. Yes. So we look forward to that. And if there's one thing I really want to share, wherever you're watching in the world today, we watch the news, we see certain things on social media, and it's really can be challenging to differentiate and know what's true and what's not out there and what to believe. And I think the most important thing is we have to show up with love and compassion for everyone in this world today, because we're dealing with some really uncertain times. And, living in fear is really can be quite difficult for many. And if there's one thing I'd love people to do is to not be living in fear, and let's take care of ourselves. Let's act positively. Let's, take a look so that, fear isn't driving us, that a conscious choice to be safe, a conscious choice to be happy, a conscious choice to be mindful, to be compassionate, to be caring, and really make a difference in the world. With social distancing right now being, one of the key words, I'm encouraging everybody to be socially close and physically distancing. Now is the time in the world that we need to take care of each other, where we need to support each other, where we need to talk to each other. There's a lot of people who are isolated in different parts of the world who aren't getting really any social interaction or connection, especially the people living by themselves. So really, if you see someone on the street, if you're out there in the world, please say hello, smile. If you're standing in a lineup, engage in conversation. You'd be surprised at how many people are not getting that kind of social interaction. And the people who are living alone, it's really more difficult for them as well. And I've known a number of people, even here in Vancouver, who have struggled and have challenges with that. And we're going into the third month. I don't know what it's like in the parts of the world where you're watching this from. We're starting to open up here in Vancouver and British Columbia, and things are starting to change. And I think it's just, again, important to stay mindful, to take care of yourself, take care of your health, take care of others. And again, please smile, be social, be close in that way, and also be mindful in your physical distancing as well, because if it's one of those things that work, we have to do what we can to make sure that we keep everyone as safe as we possibly can. Just be love, share the love, share your compassion, share your dreams, and be excited about life. Life is meant to be lived. Let's not take it too seriously. Let's be playful. Let's be passionate. Let's be present. And most of all, let's just be. I thank you all for tuning in today. My name is Marc Caron, and if you want to take a deeper dive with me, what we'll be doing is we'll be here every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. I think that's 9:30 in India, where this is airing as well. And wherever you are in the world, it's 9 9 a.m., almost 10 a.m. here in Vancouver. And I'm doing a what I call your wake up call live and interactive, which will be Monday evenings. And it starts at 7 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time. And it's where you can actually join me. It's live and interactive because I'm going to be live and I want you to join me. I want to have conversations. I want to hear from you. I want to talk deeper into these, topics that we are sharing. If you have questions, you want some coaching, this is the place to do it. It's from 7 to 8:30. It's going to be 90 minutes long. The idea and the concept behind it all is that, we can do some, group coaching, some shares, and really dive in. And if I can make a difference and help anyone out there to, live a better everyday life, I'm happy to do so. And if you have questions and you want to share, because it's not just me, you'd be surprised at how many people will join these things and actually have some beautiful insight to share as well. I believe sharing has a very powerful way of healing, creating change, opening up awareness, because we get to see life from other people's perspectives and from their conscious perspective, right? So join me every Monday night for live and interactive, your wake up call. I'd love to see you there and connect with you on an even more personal level. And we can take an even deeper dive to help create the change in your lives and share some tools that you can share and make a difference in the lives of others. So I thank you very much for tuning in and joining and watching. And I look forward to seeing you again in the future. And don't forget, Digital Meditation Summit, June 13th. I'm sure there's going to be links below in the comments here as well, and we'll get it out shared with you so that you can join us for that. Thank you very much, and have yourself a great day out there, everyone, or a great evening wherever you are, great afternoon. Just be and enjoy your present moment. Thank you. Bye now.